All right. Hello, everyone. It is Jordan here with Bill Larson. Bill, welcome. Let's see, it's June 7th, and we are recording a quick presentation of some of the structural work that we've done on Lionsberg. And so we want to just kind of dive into that quickly, give everybody a quick overview of a little bit of what we've done and why we believe it's a good hypothesis for maybe a starting point for a continuously evolving structure. And we'll go from there. So Bill, do you want to just give a quick little intro on yourself and anybody that doesn't know you?
I'm an attorney. I've done various creative things over the years and worked in different fields, mostly corporate, higher education, civil business, and so on, and done CEO mentoring and been around the world in different capacities. Had adventures, and I think life is an adventure.
Life is a great adventure. So I was led to Bill on a process of talking with dozens of attorneys and advisors around the country and around the world, trying to figure out how, if we wanted to start some kind of a community joint venture to solve the total set of grand challenges and accomplish the total set of global goals and treat it with some of the integrity that we treat any kind of joint venture we usually do, how we might go about that. So Bill did a wonderful job with me over a course of probably 3 or 4 years, kind of articulating some structure. So today we want to really quickly present what we came to and why. And so I'll share the screen here in a minute. Before we get there, maybe just want to quickly share that when we started thinking about what needed to happen and our growing concern that organizations like the UN were not going to be able to take the lead on accomplishing things like the global goals, and that us, kind of the good-hearted people of villages and towns and cities around the world, needed to figure out how to organize ourselves and make local progress towards the global goals that we share. We started thinking a lot about structure. And one of the realizations that we had fairly immediately was that if we were going to build the infrastructure and the technology and the coordinated global community that would be required to do such a thing, that nobody could own it, that it would need to exist on the basis of governance, stewardship, multi-generational stewardship, and the ability to govern and navigate wisely towards the highest overarching shared goals and values. So that led us on a search to look around the world for different types of legal structures and organizations that nobody owned, but that existed on the basis of governance and transparency for the public good. That led us to look at the constitutions of nation states. It led us to a couple week-long trips over to Mondragon in Spain to study their cooperative movement that's been going the last 70 years and is a beacon and a light and a lot of great learnings. And ultimately looking around at how we could establish the wisest structure to start here relatively quickly and get moving, recognizing that any starting point was just that, a starting point for continuous improvement and evolution. So with that, we quickly came to realize that the US, for a variety of reasons, was probably a good place to plant a seed of the first basic legal structure. We realized it would have to deal with for-profit investment capital flows, nonprofit philanthropic capital flows. We would need to be able to influence the flows of political capital and be able to deal with all these different flows simultaneously. So we looked at the different types of entities that people don't own that are more evolved in their structures, from decentralized autonomous organizations to trusts, foundations, cooperatives, and nonprofits, and the different permutations of those. And after a long search, we ultimately landed on a fairly simple solution that we believe might be a good hypothesis for a starting point. Before I share the little chart, Bill, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fun to throw things up that you didn't expect today. But isn't that how life is? It throws us these things that and as we didn't expect. And solving problems is not just a matter of legislating a solution from the top. It's not just a matter of grassroots opportunities and changing from the bottom. Some things like corporate culture, you can't change from the bottom. Solving environmental problems needs to have both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And this is brought home very clearly by Jared Diamond in his book, Collapse. He says some things you just have to accept that a bottom-up solution really makes a difference. And other times, leadership needs to take control and have that influence of consolidated resources. So I think we're looking for something that has both organizational strength and is a servant heart and is grassroots oriented. And that's, I think, what we both long to see, something where everybody could have a voice, people's efforts could matter, and yet an organizational structure that is protective, like the shell of a crab protects the life within. Well, it needs to fit the crab. You know, if a crab grows a shell that's square and it wants to be kind of a round creature, its shell's going to kill it. We don't want a shell to kill the crab here. Yeah. So that's about all I have to say about organizational structure right now.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's really great to bring in that top down versus bottom up, because a lot of times when people will even hear the word structure, there can be a reaction to say, okay, well, no, we have to be completely distributed and autonomous, and there shouldn't be any guiding structure. It should just be. And so we've thought about all those things as carefully as we can, and we agree that it's only through the sovereign, individual, local, voluntary, autonomous action in local areas and small teams that anything could ever work, because obviously we can't coordinate 8 billion people from the top down. And nevertheless, as soon as small groups and individuals get moving, we realize that we need to be able to take in and allocate resources. We need to steward common infrastructure. We need to, create solutions and templates and prototypes and ways to learn and share knowledge that need to empower that distributed network. And as soon as you want to begin to build those things, it needs to get structured. You need to be able to actually take in and allocate funds, and you need to be able to deal with multi-generational governance and all these basic issues. So we've done our best to balance those. This video is just going to be a really quick presentation of that. We will include a PDF that people can kind of peruse at will. In our coming meetings, we'll be answering some questions. But basically, our hypothesis or our proposal is that we get moving. And if nobody has developed anything significantly more compelling as a starting place, this provides a lot of forward interoperability and compatibility to evolve how it needs to. So with that, I will pull up a quick screen share. Okay, beautiful. So this is a graph, a chart that is going to be too complicated for most people to digest on this video. So we'll post a PDF. I'll maybe just take a quick minute and walk through some of the high points, and then Bill, you can editorialize a little bit, and then we'll answer questions from there. So the first thing to point out is that the structure of any kind of a global movement to solve the grand challenges, accomplish the global goals, and forge the better future that we all desire cannot be rooted in a legal structure to start. It needs to be rooted in something that's more like a community, a voluntary association of sovereign individuals and organizations around the world, completely transcendent of legal organization or structure, who are defining how they want to work together and how they want to show up in different domains. And so at the outer level, you have something like a community or a federation. I feel almost the need to apologize for having a name on this. We've been calling these things, the meta project or the meta community. And as soon as you want to begin to take in, resources and allocate those resources, you need to be able to name and register things. So after some work we've done, we chose the name Lionsberg to design and build some of the legal structuring. So that's why you see that here. But it's just purely meant to be that highest overarching and uniting concept. At the base, you have Structure of shared values. Those things are common to all people of goodwill that we find, and we can verify that via our dinner tables around the world. Things like truth, love, justice, stewardship, wisdom. And then you have these little white statements around the top that I won't go through, but they're things acknowledging that there are, numerous local, national, and regional instantiations. It's a system of many-to-many interoperability. We want to be continuously improving and deploying prototypes and templates that can voluntarily cooperate and learn from each other. As we deploy those, we realize we need shared services and infrastructure. We need systems to measure our local progress towards our global goals across all those instantiations, and ultimately be working to empower thousands of diverse projects around the world that are moving together in service of the goal. As we started with those core values and the concepts of multi-generational stewardship and governance, and looking for legal commons essentially that people don't own, we ended up with a very simple structure here after talking to dozens of advisors here in the US. And simply, it's a 501c3 nonprofit as kind of the core governance vehicle for this first legal instantiation. That means that it's publicly transparent, publicly accountable, exists for the public social good. Yet there are lots of things nonprofits can't do. And so kind of the very simple innovation was to create that nonprofit as the sole shareholder of a holdings corporation that's a C Corp. So these first two levels here of this 501c3 nonprofit that's the sole shareholder of a C Corp acts as basically a governance platform where we can build both nonprofit stewardship, governance, infrastructure, technology, as well as for-profit companies. And we can spin off a whole variety of special purpose vehicles by sector through fiscal sponsorships, partnerships, joint ventures, wholly owned subsidiaries for things that want to be a for-profit business rather than nonprofit businesses, divisions of the nonprofits, varieties of different funds, from donor advised funds to unrestricted nonprofit funds to separate funds differentiated for core team and infrastructure to impact funds that can be segregated out by sector, almost how on the stock market you have sector-based ETFs and other types of funds. We want to over time develop similar markets, and so those things can basically be stewarded by the nonprofit when it's appropriate. When we want to build for-profit companies to leverage those resources or do consulting or acquire and develop projects, real estate, energy, environmental, agriculture, all sorts of things that want to exist within more of an economy, we can begin prototyping those things through the holdings corporation while ensuring that all the equity and wealth roll up basically to the nonprofit. When saying that all the equity and wealth roll up to the nonprofit stewardship, the other really neat innovation here is because the holdings corporation is a hard tax paying entity, and because it is a typical for-profit business, both it at the holdings corporation level and any subsidiaries that are spun up can have their own governance, their own incentive programs. They can recruit and hire and pay competitive wages, and perhaps even more than competitive, because there's no shareholder group that's needing distributions or returns from that frees up an even greater amount of resources to be able to fuel the proper incentives within the organization. And then the last thing that I'll say on this structure before I pass it to Bill are that here along the sides in these blue boxes, you can see the red box, that's the nonprofit. You can see that as the sole shareholder of the blue box, that's the holding corporation, blue box of the holding corporation as the holder of these different platform LLCs and different entities. And then down here along the bottom in these light blue boxes, there's the obvious realization that there's a lot of other types of entities such as cooperatives, credit unions, trusts, foundations, 501c4 social welfare organizations, super PACs, and other political mechanisms that are fueling values aligned candidates and trying to get the right people into the right places. All of those are obviously things that cannot be housed under the same nonprofit umbrella, which gets back to the need for the overarching really community that's international, that's moving across lines, and then instantiating itself in different areas. And so that's a long but short, quick introduction to the basic system. And then the recommendation is that we get rolling, that we begin making and keeping commitments, coordinating resources, empowering a variety of special purpose vehicles, partnerships, joint ventures, et cetera. And then we can evolve the structure over time while looking at 197 different countries of the earth outside of the United States and how we can serve and empower and instantiate there as well. So Bill, over to you for some comments.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that there's a tree superimposed or kind of behind this whole thing. And we decided on that tree because it was the perfect expression of life, branching out, touching multiple areas. There's the sap and the life flow within, receiving the sunlight, taking nutrients up from the roots. The roots of the tree are in community, and the tree basically represents this flow of purpose from the heart and the community through structure so it can be focused and utilized effectively to various activities. And so I just like to point out that purpose, being purpose driven or purpose led, those are terms that are used in business as mission, in purpose, social organizations, social corporations. A lot of these terms are thrown around, but I like us to look at this like purpose is the heart commitment, the sense of value underneath our creator, however we see our creator, and welling up from the good of our community. It's like it's a moral direction and a foundation, and it's a purpose that is like a wellspring. All of these motifs are very well encapsulated in the idea of a tree. So if you look at how this functions, you can see that the idea of purpose continues to grow outward and touch various applications. You can have joint ventures, there can be real estate, there can be manufacturing businesses, there can be consultancies, there can be environmentally sound manufacturing and reclamation. There's sustainable agriculture. All these things that are important to different aspects of human society are envisioned to work within this system. So as you can see, there are little trees down on the bottom there, springing out of the worldwide community. It represents that this is just one iteration, but we want it to be a good iteration. And it's something people can use. It can grow some nuts and fruit, So like we didn't mention fiscal sponsorship, but that's one of the red boxes just above the nonprofit. I realized I neglected to put that box in there. But fiscal sponsorship is important. That means that individuals or small groups or larger groups can solicit funds to be raised, tax-deductible funds to come to the nonprofit, that the nonprofit can give out in grants to projects that are either for-profit or nonprofit, but that fully and specifically support the mission of the nonprofit. So we can do all kinds of good activity through various projects, and people can have an independence in that as long as they can articulate what portion of their activity and the use of the funds is focused on that compatible mission. And then for-profits, just one last comment. For-profits, if you want to have a company where people don't have to fear that they're going to be terminated because the shareholders want just a little bit more profits, if you want a company that is sustainable and that treats people as if they're essential partners in this process, then the good way to do that is to have an organization that's not driven by the potential lawsuit for failing to raise enough profits. this system basically establishes the ability to protect ideas, visions, people, purpose, relationships, and the earth all together.
Yeah, beautiful. And we can talk in subsequent videos about things, but there's obviously important issues around intellectual property, how we set up legal commons, how the result of all our activities and dialogue and community are feeding something like a generative commons, where this intellectual property, which is not the property of any but the property of all, is then available but protected, so that it can be acted upon by lots of different groups and organizations around the world. And just wanted to quickly mention that when Bill said, the nonprofit can support things that advance its mission, we set up the nonprofit's mission legally to be simply designing and building a better world. From my background in large scale heavy civil infrastructure, that language is coming in, but that's basically, I think, what we're here to do. We're here to gather together the best people we can to design and build the best possible future that we can. And what we want to do is set up the pragmatic structures to empower as many people around the world that are already moving in service of life to be able to do that more effectively, with greater resources, greater community, and greater shared infrastructure. The trees around the earth, you'll notice, are silly little pictures of different kinds of trees, but that's intentional there to represent the fact that we're not, it obviously would not be wise to build a global monolith. This is about the way that shared values and the highest overarching and uniting shared intention and goal can be expressed into each individual domain and local time and place. And that's really why the heart of this needs to be community, because the more people we gather together around the world, we're going to need a lot of unique structures. We're going to need a lot of unique designs. We might figure out how to deal with 197 different nation states in this decade, and by next decade, governments will change and it'll be different. So the structure, the legal elements of this are constantly evolving, and technology is obviously going to fuel a tremendous amount of legal innovation. So what we're shooting for here is basically a starting point. We believe time's short and it's time for us to get moving. We've got a great critical mass of people. And the hypothesis is that the best way to do that right now, as we begin creating shared intellectual property, infrastructure, resources, is to do that through this very simple structure that's a publicly accountable, transparent 501c3 nonprofit organization. It's the sole shareholder of a C corporation that acts as a holding company and an endowment that then can fuel in turn a variety of special purpose vehicles. And then from there, we can take the same idea, same DNA, same seed, and start replicating it around the world. So that's the basic structure. What we'll do is we'll distribute this little PDF, which is very simple in this very simple, short-ish video, and then just invite comments. And so we'd love to go through a period here of questions and answers. Yeah, please submit the strongest crowbars and the toughest questions to try to, these are all hypotheses to be disproved. And if anybody has come up with a better or more comprehensive solution, we would love to know about it. We'd love to pivot, adapt. We're here in service of life and just want to move. The other thing that I'll mention is we're looking at a system view of legal structure, because that's the purpose of this video. But we know that legal structure and law and those kind of things are only the faintest restraint or the faintest aid to human beings. And so what we've also done, which we can present in a separate video, is gone through a lot of work on not just the structural elements, but also the system. So how do we take the totality of all this, of all the good people who want to move together in service of life, and through things like integrated program delivery and integrated lean methodology, transform that total program of action into a goal delivery system that could deliver on something even as big as the total nested set of global goals. So in a separate conversation, we'll talk a little bit about the Lionsberg integrated delivery system that we've designed. And then in a separate conversation, we can talk about culture and values. So we know that it's really the patterns and the culture that are the only thing that persists. As we mentioned before, every decade, the legal structure is going to change. Every decade, the technology is going to change. So it's really the heart, the culture, the patterns, the pattern language is ultimately what persists and can be improved over time.
Jordan, as we send this out for critical review, peer reviewed here, I would encourage any of our friends who look at this to ponder how they might find a way to integrate some of these ideas into their activities in life. How could this structure be a servant to what they're doing? And also, how does it react when other things happen? So look at this from different angles and come up with the kind of questions that may be abstract or theoretical, and some that may be personal. How can this help you? And let's talk about that.
Beautiful. Are we missing anything, Bill?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're missing tons of stuff.
We talked about this for 3 years. That was maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah, well,
yeah,
we can have a what do you call it, a redaction conversation here, kind of talk for the next 3 years, kind of disassembling this and applying it. And we're looking forward to lots of good questions.
So what ultimately the conclusion is, and again, I'm going to fall back on my history building infrastructure. When there's things that are too big for any one individual or organization to accomplish in isolation, you have to set up some kind of a special purpose vehicle or joint venture structure that you have to set up some kind of a special purpose vehicle or joint for sorry, excuse me. You have to set up a special purpose vehicle or joint venture structure purpose built to accomplish that kind of mission and goal. And so that's what we've attempted to do here, and to trace that not only through the legal structuring, but through the process structuring and some of the cultural structuring of how we need to be in the community to hopefully move this forward. So anyway, we love everybody. Appreciate you. Thanks for taking the time to watch this. Thanks for the review, and look forward to discussing it more soon.
Great, thanks.
All right. I will stop the screen share. Bill, thanks so much for jumping on this quick video. Really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for your help with this. All right. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Take care.